What's going on, everybody? Welcome back into the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. My name is Lucas Wencl, and today we are talking about 10 players that you can look to drop after week 2 of fantasy football to make room for those waiver wire ads ahead of week 3. We're going to cover guys in both deep leagues, shallow leagues as well. But before we dive on into that list, if you want a chance at winning a signed Devonta Smith Eagles helmet for free, courtesy of our friends over at pristineauction.com, all you need to do is head to fantasypros.com/contest, complete the form, and either download the Fantasy Pros Draft Wizard app, leave a review for the podcast, or follow us on X, Instagram, or TikTok at Fantasy Pros. The more actions you complete, the more entries you're going to receive. We'll be announcing a winner right here on the podcast, so if you're watching over on YouTube, be sure to subscribe and turn on those notifications so you can be alerted when new episodes are up and to come claim your prize. Our first cut candidate this week is Carolina Panthers wide receiver Adam Thielen. This should be an easy cut with how putrid the Panthers offense has been, but hey, you know what? At least Adam Thielen is getting his cardio in. He's played the most snaps and run the most routes of all Panthers wide receivers over the first 2 weeks. However, it's only amounted to weekly finishes of the wide receiver 57 in week 1 and the wide receiver 70 in week 2. Thielen was also seen coming off the field visibly frustrated in this last week's game, and it's clear that the Panthers offense is a complete mess right now. At this point, it's difficult to justify rostering any Carolina Panther, and Thielen can safely be dropped in all league formats. The second player on our list is Alexander Mattison, running back for the Las Vegas Raiders. After stealing the show from Zamir White in week 1, Mattison came crashing back down to earth in week 2. Part of the hope for Mattison as a waiver wire added last week was that he continued to see a role in the passing game after drawing 6 targets in week 1. That wasn't the case in week 2. Despite throwing 38 times against the Ravens, Mattison didn't draw a single target, and instead, Ameer Abdullah came in on 8 snaps and drew 2 targets. 6 of Mattison's 6.1 fantasy points in week 2 came from a 1-yard touchdown, and he had totaled 0 yards on 3 carries prior to that. Mattison likely won't be contributing consistently enough to keep him on the end of your bench, so unless you are in the deepest of leagues, Mattison can find his way back to the waiver wire. The next player you can look to drop this week is Demario Douglas, wide receiver for the New England Patriots. I was surprised to see that Douglas was still rostered in 43% of ESPN leagues as of Monday morning, considering where he stands in this New England Patriots wide receiver room. There was once a hope that he could be the glue guy, the consistency guy for Drake May or Jakobi Brissett. But through the first 2 weeks, Douglas is just another wide receiver in this hodgepodge of a Patriots pass-catching core. Pop did run the most routes of all the team's wide receivers against the Seahawks, but it led to 0 targets on the afternoon while Hunter Henry dominated the show. The Patriots have also chosen to lean into the run to start the season. They're currently 4th in run play rate this year, and unless Pop can break through and firmly establish himself as the top dog in this Patriots wide receiver room, he can sit on the waiver wire in all league formats. Another wide receiver you can cut your ties with is Allen Lazard of the New York Jets. Week 1 was a fun ride with Lazard. 6 catches on 9 targets for 89 yards and 2 scores, en route to finishing as the wide receiver 3 overall on the week. Week 2, though, not the same story. Lazard still played a healthy 47 of 57 snaps, but only drew 4 targets and caught 2 of them for 11 yards. Now, I'm not just cutting bait with Lazard because of one bad performance, but there's another reality to consider here too. Mike Williams saw his snap share rise from 17% to nearly 65% in week 2. As he continues to work his way back from his ACL injury, Williams will continue to be more involved in this Jets passing attack. Considering they gave Mike $8.3 million guaranteed this offseason, it wouldn't be surprising to see him overtake Lazard in snaps sooner rather than later. If you're in a deep league and want to ride one more week with Lazard, be my guest, but I'm also perfectly okay dropping him. For the second week in a row, you can look to send Chicago Bears tight end Kmet to the waiver wire. Things did take a turn in Kmet's favor in week 2. He outsnapped fellow tight end Gerald Everett 54-25 and ran 28 routes to Everett's 21. That uptick in snaps led to 4 catches on 5 targets for 27 yards, which unfortunately still isn't all that inspiring. Let's assess reality here. Once Keenan Allen returns, Kmet returns to being the 4th option in a Bears passing attack that has left a lot to be desired through the first 2 weeks of action. Unless you're in an 18 or 20 man league, it's highly unlikely you'll be considering Kmet as a weekly option in your fantasy lineup. And even in 12 to 14-man leagues, it's not advantageous to stash low upside tight ends like Kmet when there are other higher upside pieces to be had on the waiver wire. Especially in shallow leagues, Kmet can still find his way to the waiver wire after week 2. Another player returning to the drop list this week is Curtis Samuel, wide receiver for the Buffalo Bills. Unfortunately, not much change from week 1 for Curtis Samuel. Keon Coleman, Mac Hollins, and Khalil Shakir all played 30 plus snaps while Samuel only played 12. He also ran half as many routes as all of the pass catchers mentioned, and is still clearly the odd man out. Whether he's still recovering from turf toe, isn't as effective of a blocker as Mac Hollins, whatever the reason may be, Samuel just isn't a rosterable piece at this point. He's still rostered in 35% of Yahoo leagues and 55% of ESPN leagues, so unless you're in a deep league where the waiver wire is completely thinned out, Samuel isn't worth hanging on to if he's going to continue to be stuck as the Bills' wide receiver 4. Adding on to the list of wide receivers you can dump this week is wide receiver Josh Palmer of the Los Angeles Chargers. To almost everyone's surprise, it was Quentin Johnston who stole the show on Sunday, catching 5 passes for 52 yards and 2 scores for 22 fantasy points on the afternoon. Palmer lagged behind QJ not only in production, but both in snaps and routes run as well. Palmer was third on the team behind Lad McConkey as well, playing only 30 snaps and running 14 routes. Unfortunately, the path isn't going to get much easier for Palmer going forward. The Chargers draw the Steelers, Chiefs, and Broncos in their next 3 games, who have all been less than ideal matchups for wide receivers thus far. The Chargers have also called the 3rd highest percentage of run plays in the league this year, and that likely won't change with Harbaugh and Roman at the helm. In shallow leagues, Palmer can safely be dropped for his lack of upside and schedule coming up. It's time again to talk about cutting ties with Blake Corum of the Los Angeles Rams. I hear you. He's one of the most valuable handcuffs in all of fantasy football. And if you're in a deep league or the Kyren Williams manager, you don't have to drop him. I know it's only been 2 weeks, but week 2 really only confirmed Sean McVay's week 1 actions. We can take a gander at the box score and see that Corum logged 8 carries for 28 yards. But you also have to realize all of Corum's touches came in the last 5 minutes of the game when things were way out of reach for the Rams. Until that point, Kyren had played 41 of 44 snaps, with Ronnie Rivers handling the other 3. And while Corum is a valuable handcuff, it's not like Kyren has been putting up astronomical numbers like he did last year. Through 2 games, Kyren is only averaging 2.4 yards per carry and has finished no higher than the running back 17 in PPR formats. The Rams' offensive line woes are clearly impacting his production, and is that a scenario that we're really that optimistic for Blake Corum to be stepping into should something happen to Kyren? Again, if you're in a deep league where you can afford to stash handcuffs, by all means keep them stashed. But in smaller, shallow leagues, it is okay to dump Corum, especially if you aren't the Kyren Williams manager. Another Raider you can look to dump this week is wide receiver Jakobi Meyers. Again, this is primarily for y'all playing in shallow bench leagues, but it seems as though Jakobi isn't going to find the same early season luck as he did last season, where he was the wide receiver 12 through the first 7 weeks. Now, nobody was holding on to that expectation coming into this season, but Meyers has been outperformed by rookie tight end Brock Bowers through the first 2 weeks. Bowers currently leads all tight ends in yards, receptions, and targets thus far, and it's clearly impacting Jakobi's fantasy value. With Devontae Adams as the alpha and Brock Bowers flourishing thus far, Jakobi's upside is extremely limited. Despite playing a ton of snaps and keeping pace with Devontae and routes run, he can hit the waiver wire in smaller league sizes. Our last cut candidate of the week is running back Chase Brown of the Cincinnati Bengals. Despite all of the preseason hype, Chase Brown has clearly been second fiddle to Zach Moss this year. Across the first 2 weeks, Chase Brown has played 30 snaps to Zach Moss's 84. Those 30 snaps have only led to 10 touches for 54 total yards. Now, efficiency-wise, you're content with that, but when you see that Zach Moss has totaled 24 touches for 108 yards, it's not making up for much of anything. In deeper leagues, you're fine holding on to Brown as he is playing a small role, but for those of you with shallow benches and smaller league sizes, you can cut Brown if there's a higher upside running back on your waiver wire. Alrighty, y'all, that is it. That is all I have for you today. But before we sign off, remember, if you want a chance at winning a signed Devonta Smith Eagles helmet for free, courtesy of our friends over at pristineauction.com, all you need to do is head to fantasypros.com/contest, complete the form, and either download the Fantasy Pros Draft Wizard app, leave a review for the podcast, or follow us on X, Instagram, or TikTok at FantasyPros. The more actions you complete, the more entries you're going to receive. We'll be announcing a winner right here on the podcast, so if you're watching over on YouTube, be sure to subscribe and turn on those notifications so you can be alerted when new episodes are up and to come claim your prize when we announce it.